Welcome everybody to our webinar series today. This is October 8th, and this is webinar number 56 and of this season of webinars since we started these in March of 2020. Um, been having a great time with these. This webinar is slightly different and one that I've been looking forward to. We started off with these webinars, and you can look back on the YouTube and take a look at the entire series. Obviously, we store them all there with all the documentation and all the related files and all that. We started off with having to kind of set the base, right? We talked about the very first one was talking about downloading in the new software and some tips and tricks of how to set up your downloading and making sure everything works well with the Wi-Fi and the cabling, but a lot of Wi-Fi information in that. And then so we just continued to build on the whole platform, and we talked about specific functions, and it's all been a bit of a plan, right? So we talked about that, and then we started to get into how to use the data to go faster and how to look at it for vehicle performance, and we just continued to build. And now what we're and then we had the one the other day with Tommy Kindle that was more maybe a little bit more entertainment based. And then this one and next week certainly, and maybe some more that are coming up soon, are going to be kind of taking the product, taking the software, and doing more with it, digging in a little bit deeper. And because of that, we're going to talk today, as an example of that, we're going to talk today about track event prep and planning using your aimsports data and video. And it's been something that I've been looking forward to. Already mentioned in the last webinar on Tuesday that next Tuesday will be James Colborn. He's going to talk about learning methods, understanding. Maybe I like to look at the data traces, but maybe you like to look at a channels report or an export or everything on maps or in video. And so James is going to talk about what do these learning styles mean, and how can you figure out what you are, and then how do you bring that into it and use this our software and our hardware to do that for you. So looking forward to all of those. All of those as a bit of an explanation and introduction of Matt, who is going to be our pardon me, is going to be our co-host today. This is Matt's sixth time of being a webinar co-host with us, and I do appreciate that, Matt. I know there's a lot of work that goes into every one of these from that side, and we do appreciate it. And Matt's been an AIM dealer for quite a while, one of our leading technical and stocking AIM sports dealers. I see Matt all the time at different tracks. I get calls from him and texts and other people that are at tracks, and Matt's just out there. He's an enthusiast about motorsports. He's an enthusiast about data, and just fun to have him here working with us and presenting a little bit here. So Matt, can you give us maybe a little bit more about who you are and what you do, and let the folks know?
Yeah, I saw who go back. It was hopefully I pronounced right. Jens commented that the best car, he's in Stuttgart, and the best cars come from there. You can see my 914 there from Stuttgart.
There you go.
And I started out as a track day enthusiast and got into data. It really made sense to me. Got a call from a longtime friend one time, and he said, "Hey, can you come down to Texas with us and help us out?" And then it just kept rolling and rolling, and became an AIM dealer. And I really just focus on the AIM so that I'm kind of super deep in it. I understand the technical part of it and everything else. And it's just really fun. I really enjoy it. And like Roger said, I'm really excited for this session too. It took me more work to put this one together, but I think it's going to be a pretty cool one and give people a lot of really neat ideas of how to tie everything else together.
Absolutely. I realize it did take more work on this one, and I appreciate that. So what we're going to do is we're going to get fairly quickly, we're going to get into it. I do want to, the last couple of webinars, we have not taken any polls, and I do want to start with one. And so I'm going to launch that at this point. Launch that. And it's kind of one we start with often, which is, what owned AIM devices do you have? What do you use? And it's multiple choice, so you can pick several if you do have several. We also, down at the bottom, I always talk about it, but it says SmartyCam/other. If you're running anything else, take your other and put other into the chat box and tell us what else you're running. That helps us. We do use this information a lot to to study and look at, and then be planning for future webinar topics. So these are not just for fun and just us grabbing information. It is grabbing information, but it's for the reasons of planning and making sure that we're hitting our target, right? So keep that in mind. I appreciate that. We're going to let that kind of play out for maybe about a minute or so. I'm going to slide up to the next slide, and maybe Matt, talk about this slide just a little bit, and then give me a little bit of a break, and I will we'll finish that poll and turn it over to you for the next few.
Yeah, and a quick comment on the poll. One of the ones, as I was talking to people about today's session, they said, "Oh, a lot of these things don't apply to me because I don't have a Race Studio 3 device." I think it's important to realize that in the AIM system, well, a few of the features may not work, all the basic items come forward, and you have that functionality in RS2 and RS3. So don't ever feel that you can't get it. Besides the video integration, that's the only one that you can't get. But what's so great about it, as Emiliano had pointed out, if you have a new SmartyCam, even with an older logger in the SmartyCam HD, you still get that integration. Maybe not the same super technical level, but you get it. So remember that as we look at this. And then to this slide is, I put this in there. I see Emiliano commented about it, and I did this for him. When I was over at the factory, we went to Monza. It's such a cool place. And sort of what made me think about doing this webinar for everyone is, so often you'd see these great infographics from different, whether it's a tire company, a track, or a series that includes, G-forces or average speeds, top speeds. This one, what is pretty neat is it has lateral acceleration and some of those measures, where it's neat to check these out. And I always looked at it and said, "Oh, this is pretty cool. I wish I had that." Now, I don't have the skill to make that beautiful infographic, but I have a way to make the data. So that's kind of how I started this out and thought about it. And through a few of the books, is Jorge Seegers, his book on analysis has a bunch of this sort of stuff, and I just kind of ran with it.
So you're kind of setting it up to where we're going to go the rest of the way, which I appreciate. I'm going to end that poll and get that off your screen if you haven't, if it's still in your way. So let's go ahead and get that out of the way. We'll do another poll a little bit later in the presentation today, and talk about which different functions in the software do you use the most, because we're looking at filling a couple more open dates on some more functionality parts of the software, so that will be helpful to me. So Matt, I'm going to go ahead and give you this remote control. Let's give that to Matt, so Perfect. You can click away and move your way through the presentation, point at different things. There you go.
So let's see, here we go. So the first one I want to talk about in a big general sort of sense is the track topography, because we go to the track and it's got hills and rises and everything else. And I'm not going to get into, as we go through all these things, I'm not going to get into the fine details of how we do all these, but we have a lot of these in previous sessions. So hopefully Robinson can throw out some of those links for us and looking at those and everything else. And I see he got the first one. So one of the things I like to look at is I go through and I just put the altitude, and the top graph here, you can see the altitude where the track goes up and down. GPS slope, that's one that James Clay had talked about. And I know that's a way that Roger really likes to look at it. And then I did the GPS map, colored it for slope, as you can see up here. And then I also did the segments map and a channel report here, so you can see the altitude in here as well. A great way to look at things, all different kind of angles of looking at it, and see which one makes sense to you. And that's a big part of everything I do today. Is this is a way that makes sense to me and a way I like to look at it. But if you have something that's different, use your data, use your things, and jump at it. And this is one where you might go, "Hey, why is the slope important?" Well, say you're running a Formula V or Roger and I at the beginning of this were talking about Toyota Atlantics. You're running something that you got to jet the carburetor. Well, here, look, we know our height roughly from sea level. We can take all this, and you'll see at the end, we can compile this and compare track to track and go, what setups work at different ones. So a great way to look at track topography in it. The next one, this is my favorite view of track topography because it really speaks to me and how I see. And this is one that if we take the GPS map and we right click on it, double right click, we get a 3D map, and we can use the buttons up here. Hopefully you all kind of see where I'm pointing at the top. to change our aspect and our view of it, whether we're looking at the top, the front, in those views. And in doing that, we get this really cool 3D view. So the blue is lower, the red is the highest point. But as you're standing back from the track, you can see where it's higher and lower. So you can see this track, this is the front straight, and this is the back, and it's still not, it's lower than kind of the plane, but it's still higher than start finish. You can see just how much of a hill it goes up these corners. I think that's a really good way to see things and visualize it. And as you go to different tracks and you start pulling it out, sometimes as a driver, it starts to reinforce how it was. And I also find it's a great way when I'm kind of visualizing driving before I get to an event. This is one when I close my eyes, I look at it, I go, oh yeah, that hill looked really steep. And maybe it's one where you go back and you look at the slope here and you go, yeah, that was really steep. And as you're thinking about the track, you put all those images in your mind with it. I find this is a really great way to kind of refresh me on where I'm going and how it looks. The other one, it was a different track, was at local track to me, New Hampshire Motor Speedway. I was telling Roger about this the other day, that turn 2B, you would turn in and the car would always slide to the apex. It would always push in, and I never could quite figure out what was going on because it was kind of the only spot I had this problem. And I jumped in here to one of these maps and I saw the track dipped 3 feet from turn in to the apex. And I went, oh, that's why the thing doesn't hook up. And it was once you got it to the apex and the track came back up to you, then it turned and did what you wanted. So a great way when you see these things or you feel it or you experience it, jump back into your data and see what you have and plan it. So then instead of trying to make your car not push, you look at it, you go, oh no, that's a track feature that causes this, not that. So we don't need to bias the car for that corner. Hopefully that kind of makes sense to people and how I look at those parts. Then what I did is I jumped into Race Studio 3, and I'm going to do that some throughout all this to show you the different ways that we can do things maybe different or better in Race Studio 3 versus just Race Studio 2. So what I really liked about this one is on the bottom here is I just have my slope and elevation. And then what I really like about this is with the Google map or whatever underlay you want to use, we see our position right here on the track. And in the video part, what I thought was really cool and helped me with it is I could see the track went up. I could see that elevation change as the track came up, and then I see it in the data down below.
From the driver's perspective, as you would see it while you're out on the track, which then is a trigger for you to
Right.
know that when you go into that corner down here, you're actually going to be planted into that corner a little bit more than what it normally would seem like.
Right. And as I was doing it, as I put in these slides together, I said, I want to show this and this, and how do I do this in Race Studio 3? These were ones that kind of popped out to me, and I went like, oh man, that's really cool. And I found all these really neat features through it as I was doing it. And there's some more as we get going. So
there was a question a second ago. Somebody answered it behind the scenes, but I think it was David, if I remember right. Sorry about the name change, but he talked about what about the slope of the road? And while the GPS, it's a single sensor in the middle of the roof of your car or up on the dash, we do not get the slope of the road, right? We get the slope of the up and down, but we don't get the camber of
right.
corners. And one of the things that's kind of interesting about having your video when everybody begins to use Race Studio 3 analysis, if you have SmartyCam video, is your visually you can at least see it, right? You can see here that we are actually on, there is a bit of a banking to this track, and then it goes uphill towards the end of the straightaway.
And another one, as I did all this, as an experience I had was if you go to a track like Daytona or Homestead that has a lot of banking, when you look at your data set, the track is roughly level, front to back. A lot of ovals, sometimes they're offset a little bit, but when the car goes up the banking, you'll see a significant change, and that starts to tell you the banking. So if you wanted to do a bunch of math, you could do the trig functions to make the triangle from if somebody drove a lap on the apron, drove a lap up top, you could figure that out. But like Roger said, it's a very hard thing to calculate. Banking wise, camber of a corner is super hard to calculate from a data set. So I think this is a good way just to look at when you think a track goes up and it goes down, and how does that affect your driving? Here's a great way to look at those things. The next one I wanted to jump into was corner radius. So we'll see in a slide too, we can do the math behind the scenes, and we can try to display this a lot of ways. And I think using the track report is a really powerful tool to show this, because we can color it for radius and we can have the flags on it. So we have a flag, we can look at it and say, you know, this corner is I think it says there 151 foot radius corner. And what's pretty cool about doing it this way is that's our driven line, not the design of the track, because the inside corner of that track is probably 100-foot radius and the outside one might be 150, but the one that you drove is what we really care about. That's what we're trying to figure out. So this is a great chance to look at a track and compare, does it have loose corners and tight corners, or are they all in a range? You know, here we can see we got some 300 and something footers. We've got some a 96, 100-foot corner, 150. So this track's got a range, but we go, geez, this corner at 150 and this corner at 140, and we got 150 something and 160 something. We go, geez, that's the range this track we're seeing a lot of. I thought of it after I put this all together and I didn't grab it, but if you do this and you drive at Road America or you're at the runoffs right now, there's a great story about Road America, and I have no idea if it's true. When they built the track, the guy had a 90-foot chain and a bulldozer, and he would find a tree and run a radius and then go on to the next, down a straight to the next corner. So if you've got Road America data, grab the webinar with Jeremy where he showed how to do this and take a look at it, report back to us. It'd be cool to hear if that's really how it all worked out. I was just reading the questions here, and some people ask about, can newer units on bikes with the lean equal road camper? When I've tried it, it didn't work. I don't think it worked well.
Yeah, because the lean is the motorcycle, compared to straight up and down, right? So there, you'd always have that degree of camber of the track.
Right.
There might be some ways to do some interesting math, but it's going to be a little bit difficult no matter what, just because of forces.
Yeah, to get that camber part of it, it gets really complex, and you really need to have either shock position or ride height sensor to do it all. And
because your car's going to roll on top of it, right?
Buddy Fay basically tells you how to do it in Data Power.
There you go.
You go through it. It's the basics of it are in there, but then you have to keep adjusting for everything. So this is one I said, geez, this is really powerful. And as you take it from one track to the next, you can look at this and go, geez, this corner at this radius is just like a corner at this track. This corner, when I drive it, this corner right here, and this is my data, it's the same data we've used in some of the other sessions. This corner driving it reminds me of Big Bend at Lime Rock. And then it's a great way you go, geez, I think of it that way. Look at the data and go, is it the same radius? Is it the same style? I look at this one from this view and I go, oh, it's not really the same, because the decreasing radius is different than how you drive Big Bend. But it gives you a chance to say, well, it's the same radius, it's the same approach, and it starts to help you build some links in your mind as you're preparing for your next event. Like, how am I going to drive that? What am I going to do? And then what I did is I jumped in, I said, well, how else do we display this? And I said, in Race Studio 2, we can do our GPS map. We can do that same channel, the track report, and then we can have the squiggly lines, the measures plot, just like Jeremy did a bunch. And then what's a cool one is, as you plan this and you start to think about it, you use what Jeremy taught us, and we look at this and go, well, geez, this one's a late apex, and we can kind of evaluate the driving and see a bunch of stuff in there too. So it's a good way to look at everything and do this one. And then if you take this view and you put another track with it, you start to be able to compare tracks. And if you want to set your car up, you go, geez, this one, the corners are tighter or slower or faster, whatever it may be. And it gives you a way to start to compare between events what you're doing and how to prepare for it. And then what I did was I jumped into Race Studio 3. What's awesome in Race Studio 3, in the GPS measures, they've included radius force. There's no math, there's nothing you have to do other than click the channel. Super powerful, really nice way to be able to do this. So now with a single click, we have it. The other thing that, as I was doing this is one of the other moments where I looked at this and I went, oh, this is so cool. I added an arrow because sometimes on these, it's hard to see. So this arrow points down. That's our point on the plot. We can see our vertical line. Here's our point on the map. Right there is where the car is. So when you try to go, hey, where's my apex? There it is. You now have that on the map.
A good visual, and then again, if you had your in-car SmartyCam data there, you would be looking at that point out your windshield on top of it, right? So
yeah,
all sorts of different ways to learn and prepare for the
yep.
prepare for your next event.
And it was one that when I saw it, I put it on the map. I went, oh, that is so great. Not just to have like, is it an early apex or a late apex? Then you have it right here. And when you're doing this live and you're in your data, you start to zoom in and it helps you build those notes as you're prepping for the next track event. Maybe it's a track you've been to once, or maybe it's a track you've been to 100 times. You start to make your notes and you go, geez, turn 12. This is where the apex is. It's at this curve, right? And you can make those notes and you can start to ingrain it in you. So pretty powerful stuff. Those extra channels that are included, and in the beta release yesterday with all the extra math functions, they're just so powerful in what they give us that we don't have to try to compute anymore.
Or even another great example, and it happens all the time nowadays, or you're going to go to Lime Rock for the first time and you've got a buddy that has ran some data there, and they're nice enough to give you the data in the video, and boy, you can do a lot of what everything you're talking about here before you ever visit that track with some borrowed data from somebody. Very, very powerful.
Right. And the cool part with this is it's across all the AIM devices, right? So you can get that map even if you have Evo 4 or an old MXL Pista. It's on there. You get
Just
that.
needs a
It's
GPS
so
sensor and you're off and running.
Yep. Oh, 2 slides there. A gear map. So many times, you're at the track, you're doing it, and it goes, hey, when do I ship? When do I shift? When do I need an upshift, downshift? What corner is that gear? Well, here it is. So one of the things I do for my driving is I print these maps out with a note, and not only do we have gear position up here, and I think Robinson will throw us a link for Cameron's session that how to calculate this. And then we throw it on these maps and we get great gear position in the measures graph and on the map. Really powerful. So now there's no more like, what gear do I need here? What gear do I need there? I think the other neat thing about doing it this way is, say you're someone like a Formula V racer who has a short box and a long box, or in Trans Am 2, we run drop gears in the rear end, and then sometimes there's different transmissions that people have run, whether it's we're stuck fourth gear is always 1-to-1, but you can run some other ratios. So this tells you if you've got 2 transmissions, you can start to look at this and go through and try to figure it out. And with the session that Samir did, it gives you even more power to jump in here and go, well, I have my old gear map. I'm planning for my next event. Was this necessarily the best? Maybe there's something I can do a little bit better in here. So it's all different ways to start to look at this and to plan it. It's also a good thing if you take good track notes, stick these with your track notes, print this out, right? There's a great option. You go file, print. If you go through the settings, you can even put your team logo and name and everything in there. Stick it with your notes that you have this gear map. So as you're looking to go back to a track, you flip through it and you go, oh yeah, I forgot that has that weird shift as I'm coming into that corner. The other part that I thought was so cool when I jumped into Race Studio 3, I made this, and then immediately I fired an email to Roger and Emiliano, and I said, this is the best thing, because I had been doing this on different monitors. So I stuck it in real quick. We have a few maps here, right? We have our gear chart. We have an overview map. So I see my position on the track is right here. This is the corner. And then I zoomed in and I said, this is the exact point on the track. This is right when I did my downshift, and that's the view I had. So now we have all these things linked together. We have what we did, where we did it, and we see really the when, right? Because when you're driving and you look at it, you go, this is the when. I was past the first curb. I was in the middle before I started to turn in again, right? Here's my view. And I can imagine it when I drove this track. I haven't been there in a year. Way back kind of over here is my first curb that I bumped. I'm coming out. You aim for the end of this curb, and then you start to bring it back in, right? And you see all of a sudden, I didn't even thought about it that much before I just did it, but looking at these views, I went, oh yeah, that's exactly what this track is like. And you can see.
And it's a great event prep tool, right? So you go back and look at some of your data. You have this saved as a view, and you go,
Yeah.
okay, let's go do a lap, and let's watch this. Let's just focus on gear shifts. Am I doing them at the right spot? Does it seem like it's right? Maybe you throw the RPM up there, but you walk through it and you begin to get prepped. So that first practice session, you're on point when it comes time to go. Another great way of event prep and planning.
Yeah, and thinking about it that way, Roger, that's when I try to tell people all the time, if you review this data before you show up at the track, is by the end of the event, if you think you're at 100%, you're driving, your track knowledge, everything else at 100, when you show up, if we can get to that 100% even faster.
Exactly.
So some weekends you only have maybe 4 sessions, right? Depending on the race weekend. So you don't want to start out at 50% and start, oh yeah, I forgot about that. The next session I'll do it better, right? If you can start better from the start. So instead of starting at 50%, maybe you get to start at 75 or 80 or 90. And then your driving right from the start is at a higher quality and you're getting more out of that weekend before you even showed up.
And what happens to your 100%? Your 100% gets pushed up.
Yeah. So this just ends up so powerful,
very powerful
in helping you get ready for the event, planning what you want to do, and showing up really ready. It's no more like you wouldn't show up with a car that you had the wrong tires on it and you had to change the suspension. So why would you do that as a driver? I don't know if we want to throw the next seminar out here, Roger, as I'll pull this slide out.
Let me go ahead and bring up the next poll. Let's launch that poll. While we're doing this one, it's what we're gonna. Oops, I missed the button. When analyzing your data, what functions do you use the most? Well, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm in some preparation and planning modes for the next few a couple of open dates that we have before the end of the year, and I always love to see this, and it helps me understand. Okay, what is everybody using? So select the function that you have, and I would appreciate that. We'll let that run for about a minute or so. It's multiple choice, so you get to select extra ones. Just as while this one's running a little bit, we do have our aim techs are all over the place. We got a couple guys at the runoffs, and working hard there. We've got Robbie, who has showed up here in the background. No doubt on his cell phone. He's at the UTV World Championships and working that event, and then coming here and working the webinar as well. So I appreciate that, Robbie. You're double. You're stepping in 2 places. But we do have Robinson as the person giving us our links in the chat box and doing a great job as well. So let's finish that one up next, just another couple seconds, and I'm going to go ahead and we will close that poll, and then we'll share the results and give everybody a pretty good idea of what everybody else is doing. So let's end that poll now, and let me share the results for everybody to take a look at. So there you get an idea. Measures graph, kind of the home base in AIM software. Obviously, it's I always use that term, measures graph as boss. We use that for a reason. We've talked about that a lot in previous webinars. Measures graph. 90% of you are using that one as a big piece of what you do. The second one is time compare bar. It's a part of the measures graph, and it's one of the most powerful tools inside the software for us to use. So I'm glad to see that. Channels report. Number 3, I think it's been always in that area, but I don't think it's been in previous times we've done this poll. I don't know if it's ever been up in the 3rd spot, but it's been right there. 60% of you using the channels report quite a bit. Something we have talked a lot about here in webinars, showing on your screen right now in the upper right corner of Matt's next slide. And then time compare channels report, and then it looks like the split reports, another one that we have talked quite a bit about as well. And then one of the ones that's bumped up, since we've talked a lot about track reports, is down there at 21%. People are now using track reports a lot. Matt just showed that radius visualization of the radius was the track report. Thank you everybody for doing the polls. That is helpful. Math channels, 46% was right up there now as well. That was always lower the number than that is now. So that's also encouraging to see. So I appreciate that. I'm going to stop sharing those results just so we can move on from that. And Matt, you should have control of the mouse again, and you can let's talk about track speeds.
I'm going to jump backwards for a second. I know this is a major
Ah.
presentation no-no, but I saw a comment and one of the poll options there made me think of it as well, is it said Google Earth KML export. And I saw Donald said, hey, I'd love to do it. I don't know how. Emiliano gave us a good pointer. But with Ray Studio 3, you don't have to do a KML export anymore, because the KML export was to get our GPS data into Google Earth to look at it. In Ray Studio 3, we have it. This is what you would get. Oh, did I?
You click.
Oh, it tricked me. Here we go.
Yep.
We had a little delay there. But here is our Google map. So you don't need to do all that export and import and try to figure all those things out. We have it all right here. And even a bigger presentation faux pas here. Are we going backwards here? Is if we go back to our first slides of track topography, this gives you more data than most Google Earth things, because we have our slope, our elevation, and the map. And that's when it starts to get really, really powerful. And not to jump into all the features of RS3, but when you go into the different overlays, you can put one that has the, maybe Roger can help me with the right word for the lines that delineate.
Topography lines, yeah.
The topography lines. I should have known that, right? It was right there for me. But you get those lines in there and it tells you even more. So me personally, I think using Ray Studio 3 this way is more powerful than any sort of KML export that I've done. I won't claim to be the best at it, but I think this is more powerful.
While you're jumping back up to the thing, what I will add to that, the KML export, I will probably still be a user a little bit every once in a while, and mainly because when you get into Google Earth, we bring our data in, we overlay it. There's some major tools that that you can use that we, at least as of right now, Emiliano's listening to me right now. I would love to be able to have some of those same major tools in Ray Studio 3, where we can actually measure, some distances and some other things, right? Slope, click, get the slope of the road, little things like that. We might be able to get to the slope of the track by using some of the knowledge that the 3 dimensions of the KML Google Earth output. But for most people, what they really just want to see is that background image, see where they're at on the track, and have a better understanding. And we're doing that now in Ray Studio 3.
Right. My future hopes for my D hotkey, right? The delta. Because we get our distance and everything else. It'd be interesting to see what he has for us.
Yeah.
And a question that just popped up from Walter that I think is a really great one is, he said, in Ray Studio 2, can I change the data that shows on the GPS map? Yes. That's one of the coolest things I think about how to visualize that is, if you click on this rainbow graph, is how I always do it, it'll open up another window and you can go in and change any of the measures that you have. And some are more powerful than others, right? Like speed is one that always kind of makes sense to people, but you can put gear position on there. That's how I did one of those gear position maps. You can put corner radius on it. Sometimes what to play with is the power in the track reports is really a great way to also show this information. I think sometimes that's a better way because it puts a number, not just the scale. And if you use the 3D coloring on the track report, you now have the color and the number. And to me, that reinforces it. But to some people, this is cool. Another really powerful way to do it is if you put something like corner radius and then you double right click to make the 3D view of it. Now you have 2 pieces of information that, again, makes it a pretty powerful thing.
Learning styles, right? Different people need to see things in different ways. That's what's so cool about our software is that, boy, if it's something, if you need to learn about it in a different way, we tend to work hard to give you that option. The other one is this little button right here. When you do have GPS active, like Matt has got here, and if then you click on this button, it also brings up that menu. Change it to any channel that's in there, and also any math channel. So it's not just some of the core channels that we have. If it's a math channel you've created, it also can be colorized by that as well. So, there you go, Matt.
So what I want to give here is one that, it's really what drives so much of what we do is track speeds. So I did a GPS map colored for speed. I did a channel report for GPS speed, and I showed our min, our max, our average, And then a cool function that I probably don't use as much as I should is signal range. And that is the difference between the min and the max. I can't remember, maybe it was TK that he told us the story about running a 4-speed box.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So here's your great opportunity, right? You start to look at this, and this is how you do it with data, is you can look and go, geez, that's not that big of a spread. Maybe a different ratio in the transmission or a different way of doing it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, it's kind of funny. I hadn't thought about it until I was like, oh, somebody told me a story. And then I'm like, oh, it's TK in one of these webinars, right? And he said, this is a way that they came up with a way to beat the competition by planning. And when you have the data, this gives you a chance to look at it and go, well, how do I do this?
Exactly.
And you get the range, right? You can use that. You could jump into something like Samir did with the gear planning and say, if this is my total range, what do I find for top and bottom, and how do I get through this? Really powerful way to look at it, get some numbers, and to use that signal range that maybe you never thought about using before. The other one I like to do is the histogram of it. And it gives us a distribution. Is this a middle speed track? Is it all at the high end? Is it a slow speed track with one high spot, right? And we can go through there and look at that and see kind of how those speeds play into things to see what makes the kind of how it goes. Is it a real high speed track? Is it a low speed track with one fast spot? To take a look at it. And that's another one, as you look at different tracks that you go to, see what the trend is, how the places compare and do things. And then at the bottom of this, almost everything I do, I have a speed graph, because to me, I can read that and I look at it and I go, this is the track, and I can see corners in it, and I can see what's going on in the car, where I'm accelerating, where I'm braking, and what's going on. A really powerful way to do it. Looking at this now, one of the ones I kind of wish I had included that would be a neat thing here is when you look at this, if you turn off your snap function and you zoom out, you get this histogram based on a whole session. And for people that don't know where the snap button is, it is this one right here. Roger, what's the best way to describe that?
That was always a tough one for me early on, but the snap button, the way I've kind of settled on that makes sense for most people is when it is active, and that's by default, is it is snapping to one. We are lap-based software, so it's snapping to the start finish and the start finish again, and that is where it will not let you zoom out past that, right? It'll let you zoom in and look at parts of the track, but we're lap-based software. As soon as you click that and release that button and turn that off, it now is the snap is off, so it's allowing you to freely go anywhere in the data file and look at 3-4 laps, the entire session, half a session, whatever it happens to be. So that's how I always try to explain the snap function.
Yeah, and Emiliano just made a comment that I think
Yep.
is really, really good, is snap to lap. So when snap is on, it snaps to a lap. It gives you a little rhyme in there. But you can turn that off, zoom way out, so you get a big section of your data. And as you do that, because everything's always linked, you're going to see this histogram start changing around. And it's a good tool that I did a different way, because that didn't occur to me. Is the next slide, what we see is when I did this in Race Studio 3, I went and I turned on a whole bunch of laps. And then you get a histogram that it stacks them all. So you have some in behind, and then this one, our first lap, the pink lap right here, this speed range covers whatever's going on behind it, because that was the first one we selected. So really, this is a case where turning off snap and zooming out would have been a better way to maybe look at this than how I did it here.
What I always talk about is measures graph is boss. And the reason I always say that is because whatever you do in the measures graph, snap being that tool to go out and view more, many functions, virtually most, but not channel reports and some other ones not, but almost every other function then takes that as that pod of data that it is actually doing the calculation on whatever you have viewed in the measures graph, whether it's snap is off and you're looking at the entire session of 12 laps, or if you go down and just look at one corner, and it's whatever's in the measures graph is what's being used in the calculation data amount for whatever the function is.
Right. And one of the ones that we're missing here, I was hoping somebody was going to make the comment about just how quick my car was. because it was a little quirk I found when I was doing things, and I'm sure it got fixed in the beta, is I had changed it to mile per hour, and it said my car was doing either 25 or in the numbers before it said 250.
Yeah.
So I was really proud. I was like, after all the grief I got from my car not accelerating hard enough, I was going to have some good speed out of it. But
Actually, across the bottom is what it is still doing it. It's showing it in kilometers per hour, but it
right,
says miles per hour, and this is
right,
percentage of the time. So you have some laps that you're doing 180. Wow,
right.
that
I was
people give
hoping
you a
somebody
hard
was going to
time.
comment on it.
People give you a hard time about that the yellow banana, but it seems like it's pretty quick.
Right. So Robbie finally throws me a token.
There you go.
But I figured maybe Brick will get to see this later and stop giving me so much trouble on it.
A bug in the software that I believe has already been fixed. So
yes, yeah, this was
beta
I
versions.
put all these together before that beta version
Exactly
was done. And maybe a comment to the zooming versus not zooming is the reason I think to look at this and the way I work on it is I like to see my speeds here stacked.
Yeah, me too.
Because I like to kind of see the comparison. And then when I go, well, geez, there's some variance here, I get to see those ranges in my measures graph.
Different tools for different perspectives and different needs. Exactly what it's all about.
Yep. And then versus some people, they like to, when you do the snap and you look out, you just have essentially the repeat of this and you don't see how they stack. Exactly. Different ways to look at different things. And I think they always kind of work differently for different people. Channel reports. This is one where I look at it and I go, these are really, really powerful for prepping for an event. Is the first one in here that gives us track length. And it's the easiest spot to find this in the software is we get a distance. And if you have your software set to feet, it gives you feet. And I believe, I never try it because I haven't done it, but if you have it set in kilometers, it gives you meters.
It absolutely does.
And this gives you your driven track length. So as you go through here, say you're trying to compute fuel mileage, you go, oh, geez, we got a 100-mile race. What do we do? Well, here's your lap length. If you know your mileage in your car, this is how you can compute it. It's a super easy way. Like for a while, I tried to do math to do it all. And then I realized with one button on a track report, you get your track length. I don't remember. I believe it's our next one when we look at with the track distances is I go, well, geez, track reports like this for planning are so much more powerful than just looking at the distance. Is we have our lap length. And then I believe it was in the seminars that Ray did, he gave us all those ifs. And in the one Emiliano did about math channels, he gave us a lot of different ways to kind of break stuff up that if all those if statements don't always make sense to you, he gave us a really logical way to work through things to see how to do some of these maths. And then what we can start to do is put in and say, what are our total miles? So we get our lap distance and we get kind of each section and how far we drove in that lap. But at the end, we get a total distance. So maybe you're planning how long do how many miles does a set of tires last? How long in between maintenance on, changing my transmission fluid or changing the engine oil, right? This gives you how far did you really drive in that session? And if you add these up across all your sessions, you get it. There's some other tricks sometimes to look at it is whether you download your sessions as one session for each one, or you put all your tests together and you make one for the weekend. If you make one big file, you can add them all up here really easy and get a whole weekend's worth of data in one spot. The same thing is if we do the math to use the integer functions to say, how many brake miles did we go? When we're on the brakes, how many miles did we cover? And sometimes this ends up a really interesting thing to think about is a couple things in this channels report that are maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't notice, but something to really look at is when you look in here and you see it starts on lap 2. You go, well, geez, why would it start on lap 2? First lap was an out lap, so I had disabled it, but it was still the second lap. So it shows us lap 2. And what that really means is when we have brake miles, this is cumulative brake miles. And this is cumulative distance. So if we want to look at it really easy, I do the math in my head real quick and I go, well, this is like 2.2 miles and this is 0.4. So I look at it and go, geez, that's like 20% of this lap is on the brakes. You go, oh, that's pretty interesting, right? How does that compare against different tracks? Is which one are you on the brake more, which one are you on the brake less? One, nobody commented on it. This is a case of the cobbler's kids need shoes. Is as you noticed in my data before, my throttle position sensor wasn't working. This is a spot where you can look at it and go, geez, that doesn't make any sense, right? Sometimes if you see a sensor and it doesn't make any sense, or some measure in there, you go, huh, why would that be? And then you can dig into this and say, well, it was 0 the whole way. It was never on. But it gives you a great way to look at what's the comparison between full throttle and brake. And you can define that full throttle. When you look at the math channels and you do all that, you get to look at it and say, is this, did we count it as above 90%, right? And maybe you make extra math channels in there and say, these ones are greater than 90%. This is more than 80%, right? And now as you're planning it, you can kind of make those histograms for the whole thing and see what those distances are. The other one I threw in here, because it's something I have a great interest in, is heart rate. I wear a heart rate monitor in the car. These 2 laps here, as Emiliano noticed, were really boring. They just had nothing going on for me. And then the other ones, it recorded what my heart rate was on the lap. As you're using it, it's a really good way to evaluate how stressful this track is on the driver, how hard you're working. And it's in the next slide.
I would have thought, as you're going to the next slide, I would have thought your heart rate at 180 miles per hour in a 914 would have been much higher than that. So I commend you, right? You know, you're a calm guy back there.
A really interesting one is, as I've worked with some of the leading doctors on looking at all these things, I am in a small, like a 10%, 20% category of people that my heart rate's always really low.
I actually joke about that, but the numbers are very, very low, clearly. But especially for a car doing 180 miles an hour.
I mean, when you drive this fast all the time, Roger.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
But yeah, it's another great way is you look at it and you go, how hard is the driver working here? And you go, here's a great measure of it. A really great way. One of the ones, and I didn't include it on the slide, that I don't think I have it on one of the future ones that Roger and I had talked about, is if you put logger temp in here, that's a great measure to know how hot it is on the track and in the car, right? Because that's monitoring the temperature inside the device, and it might be a couple degrees higher than the actual, it might be a little bit lower. But when you go back and you go, geez, what was the weather when I was at Lime Rock 3 years ago? And you can't, you can go look it all up. You can look at that temperature and go, geez, if it says it was 40, you're like, yeah, really, it was a pretty cold day. And if it says 110, it was a hot day.
I'm kind of planning. We've only got about 10 minutes left, but I'm kind of planning on the fly here. But John had a question: how do you attach the heart monitor to AIM? I say, Matt, let's me and you begin the planning of bringing you back with some data with that as a focus. Number one, how do we hook it up, where, all that. But let's bring in, if possible, there are many racing doctors that you and I both know that I would love to have a conversation with a doctor and you and I, and let's talk about some of these other ways of looking at data using that with a focus. That might be fun to do. So that's how we'll do it, John. That's how we'll do it.
Yeah, the really short answer, it's a CAN device. So you use some of what Robbie told us in those other webinars. You wear a chest strap, an arm strap. It wirelessly goes to the device. CAN puts it into the AIM logger, and then we can put it on all the information. There's a video on YouTube that I talked to Dr. David Ferguson about how to do it, and some of what you can learn from it. But I think a session with everybody would be really a fun thing.
That would be fun for everybody to see this winter.
Yeah.
So, okay.
This channel report, what I wanted to jump into was then we go, how do we categorize this track and what do we do with it? And we say, well, then we can go, what % of this track is on the brakes? And when we look at it, it's, roughly, 22, 23%. We go, what % of this track is left-hand turns? We go, 27, 28%. Right-hand turns. Well, geez, that's 40%. And then straightaways is the balance, right? So when I did the math, I used all my if statements. Ray shows us how to do a lot of that in his sessions. and we have percent left, percent right. And then all I did for straight was I did 100 minus the other two. Made it really simple. But what's pretty neat about this track, you go, well, if you're going to bias the car to turn left or right, we would say, geez, maybe a little bit more right. And then we could jump back in and evaluate how important those corners are. If you're somebody that drives at Lime Rock, you would look at this. We don't need the data at Lime Rock, right? And you go, this is a right-hand track. Like we need to turn right, because the idea of driving Lime Rock is turn right till you get kind of bored, hang a left, start going right till you get bored.
And as I mentioned to Matt earlier, it's as a cheap car owner when my son was racing, we would go through practice, sessions, Friday sessions or whatever, with used tires, right? So we would sort our tires out, and in this particular case, there's a lot of right-hand turns on this track. I would put my best two tires on the left side and give them some worn out stuff on the rights, and we'd make it through the practice day because we know the track before we got there. So
yep.
Good preparation.
Right. And this is one of the great powers is, if you have a group of people and you share data and maybe it gets out of your region a little bit, or you have a friend that's wherever you meet some, there's so many great Facebook groups going with data and everything else, the beginners group, and, even on all the different forums as people are willing to share data, and maybe you just grab it from one of these webinars, but you jump in there and this doesn't matter what car it's from, right? People are always worried about, I need spec Miata data, or I need a B spec data, whatever it is. Well, left and right doesn't change. So this is when, if you want some general things to start looking at, that gives it to you. And whether the histograms for speeds, right? They'll change the absolute number, but the distribution will be pretty similar. It gives you a really good idea of where you're going. So when you borrow that data, you're kind of on track before you even get there. This is one I use all the time. And I don't know if we want to throw our last poll up, Roger, before I think we have one more slide.
I do not. Let's go ahead and just go to your last slide, and then we'll see where it kind of works.
Oh, we had two more slides. So this is where I'm going to send you on your own mission. Is I gave you a bunch of ways here to look at things and to do some planning and do everything. Take the channels you have in your data and start looking at them and saying, what does this tell me about the track? How do I use this to plan for the next one? So in here, part of heart rate is, if we have heart rate data and we have a couple other things about the driver, we can say, out of 100, how hard are they exerting themselves? And we go, well, this track, it's 48. 48 on itself doesn't mean a lot, but if we do this for Club Motorsports, and we do it for Watkins Glen, we do it for Lime Rock, we do it for Summit Point, Daytona, and all these other tracks, now we have a comparison and go, geez, this track, when they say this place is a bull ring, it really is, right? The driver's really, really working in there. I threw an example, there's tire temp data in here, and I go, geez, what's the tire temp? And you look at around here, and to Roger's point, you look at it and go, wow, this place is a right-hand track, and it tortures the front left tire, or tortures the rear left because the guy's always on the power and the car goes. Use whatever data you have to start doing that. The same thing for altitude, whether it's carburetor tuning, if you have a class where you get to run some crazy fuels or something, you get to work all that in. Or just as an idea, say I don't, if you're at High Plains, I wonder what the altitude at High Plains Raceway is. If you're a guy who's from the center of the country and your altitude's always kind of zero, and all of a sudden you get 5,000-6,000 feet in the air, is this something you got to plan for, to say, like, I need to be in better shape, I need to focus on not wearing myself out before I even get to the event?
Or a different tune.
You can use it for those things. I put GPS average speed because so often when we look at things, we look at what's the average speed of this track. When I started to make this one, I thought about, is it Thunderhill or Buttonwillow claims to be the fastest track in the country?
I do not know.
And a Roebling Road, I know, is another one that's their average speed for a lap is pretty high.
I was gonna say Nelson Ledges is what I have always heard as one of the higher top speeds. So
So here's one though, is like, if you have data from these places, you compare it and you go, geez, in my car, this, right? You start to pull it all together. I threw the heart rate stuff in here again. It's some of the neat stuff I thought was in this data. There we go. Willow Springs, fastest track in the West.
Thank you, Paul.
Right. Daytona is the world center of speed. Says it on
Another question that came up, Matt, as you're thinking about how to finish this up, are the math channels available for download? If you send me an email, my email will be on the last slide when we get here in just a second. I've got a package that I've put together that I've sent out to probably 300 to 400 people since we've started these webinars, that is a spreadsheet and the importable math files, and a lot of the stuff that Matt is showing here or talking about are in there ready to go. And if not, they are in there where you can input your take one of them as an example and build it into what you want. So email me at the end of this. I've got a kind of a canned email I will send you with all the math channel information that I know.
And another one that lots of people have is RPM, right? You can look at your average RPM and you go, geez, is this track working the car harder that I have to plan to change the oil and do more maintenance before the event or after, kind of thing. And I should have pointed out through some of this, so much of this stuff you can do with a solo, right? In a plain solo for the price of those things, wherever you are, you can get altitude, you can get GPS speed, you can get temp, it has temperature in it. If you have it plugged into your car, you have a battery voltage, right? You have all these things you can pull in there and start to look at to do out of this. And you can get corner radius out of a solo, right? So even in that simple device, you get tons and tons of power. I keep one because I'll send it to people to stick in a car before I go somewhere, right? Just to have the idea, what's the corner radius? How does this compare to what I'm used to?
There you go.
In here, too, is in the channel reports. We have tons of options that are covered in some of those other webinars. But somebody asked, is the max corresponding to the max value or the end of lap? It is the max value. So if your speed goes from 50 miles an hour to 100 back to 50, the max this will report is 100.
That's the way the channel reports work. There are some other ways of breaking that down and getting to where you want. But if you just use the min max values, it's going to give you the min or the max of the entire lap.
Right. The last slide, I think now, I'm onto it. So we looked at all these things for one track. So what I do for me is I do two things with this. Is I take all those things, and you can see here, this is just a screenshot of a piece of Excel, of a spreadsheet, that I cut the graphics out and I stick them here. And if you're not an Excel power user, right, take this and print them out, cut them out, stick them on a piece of paper, put them in your driver book. So I go through, and from every track I go to, I take track length, the top speed, the average speed for it, the speed profile histogram, the gear usage, right? What gears are we in a lot at this track? Some things like people are going to wonder, how did I calculate gear shifts per lap? I take that gear measures graph and I count, right? I just go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Max lateral G, I do a channel report and I take the max and the min, right? And then we have left and right. I take a picture of the friction circle, take that XY graph, and I stick it in there so I can go and say, is this track heavily biased left or right? Because the friction circle you're going to get from Lime Rock is going to be really different than you get from Watkins Glen, is going to be different than Daytona. Left-hand, right-hand corners, I go through and I count them, right? I look at the track map, lefts, rights. These ones are going to make you do a little work if you want them. If we think about our friction circle and we say, what is quadrant 1? Left-hand accelerating. We can do some math and we can make a left-hand accelerating and get that percent and add them up for the different ones. We can take our percent of the lap at full throttle, percent of the lap on the brake. Do all this and then start putting next to it the next track that you're going to. And when you take a season's worth of tracks or the tracks in your area, you're going to say, hey, this one is totally different, or it has this stuff in common. It becomes really interesting, and it helps you plan not just for going back to that track, but planning across the tracks and say, if this setup works here, maybe it seems a little crazy, but I think it might work at this track too. So
heck of a place to start, at least, right? Certainly.
Yeah, it gives you something. Or even if you look at it and you count and you go, geez, I have a track that has 7 lefts and 4 rights, and I'm going somewhere and it has 6 lefts and 5 rights. You're like, well, that's kind of similar. Maybe that's something that, maybe a setup from this place works, or, they're totally different, right? It turns into 6 and 1, and you go, well, that's not the same anymore. So this is the next step. Take all those chunks that you did to get to this point, cut and paste them. And if you can do it in Excel, if you can do it, whatever works for you, if you print it out, put it on a piece of paper, stick it in your binder and start putting all these across, and you're going to see some neat similarities. And it's going to start telling you when people say, this track really beats up the car, right? You can look at it and go, well, yeah, it's like a, my left-hand turn, it's pulling 3 Gs. You're like, yeah, 3 Gs, that breaks cars.
That right
So
front wheel bearing needs to be replaced a little bit more often if I run here all the time, right?
exactly. Like there's the perfect one, right? If this is all one direction, it starts to wear out parts different or wears out the tires different. So you can plan, hey, I have worn out tires. If I do this the other way, I can't make it through the event, but if I flip them, I can. So that's kind of your next step, to take all the stuff we did to here to put it together.
And this makes the perfect point, just to kind of close it up, is it's not universal. There is no one way to do this. That's what's so cool about the software, and all of us getting together and talking about this. We can do things in totally different ways. We've got users on here that are motorcycle racers. We've got oval track guys. We've got dirt oval. We've got off-road UTVs, a lot of sports car guys, and their needs may be substantially different. And so this topic today was not necessarily about the specifics, although it's always fun to talk about and show how we do that. But it's more just to open our eyes and say, hey, here's some processes that adapt to what you need and how it works for you.
Yeah, and to Roger's point is, as you're trying to do this and stuff, I know people are going to have a lot of questions. So shoot us an email and ask us. We can share all those math channels to get you a lot of the way through it, and whatever other questions you have about it. I know I covered a lot of things without the specific detail of how to do it. So email back and we can give you the webinar. We can give you help with it, and make sure you can do this and use your data to do something, more than just review driver stuff, but use it the next step. And it was the perfect one. I saw a couple of people comment they're getting ready for their last event. So you get this big long winter, if you're in the north, to use it to plan.
Yeah, and as we were rolling through, Tice made a comment quite a long time ago, very early on, that he recognized this data then, and he had used it as he was learning more, and now he's into this world, and he's working for teams and doing data work. Your data that he was looking at, it was available to him. Those of you that are watching this either live here today or in the future on YouTube, the link in the description down below will have the data file that we're looking at here, or one from the same track or near from Matt, and it'll be down there for you to download if you don't have your own data as well. So it'll have a lot of that, the heart rate data and the shock sensors and the brake pressures and the math channels are all be built into that. So that'll be available for you as well. So.
Yep.
Perfect. Let's kind of close this out and get ready for the next one. This video, as I just mentioned, will be on our YouTube site. It'll be our 122nd video that we're placing up there. All of these 56 webinars are there, obviously, and then a bunch of, tons of other videos where we talk about specifics of how to sort the channels, how to, use the snap function, how to some of the stuff we talked about today. So that lots and lots of videos out there, and more obviously being added every week. So the talk about the next webinar after we talk a little bit about the customer support. Robbie was here. He had to break away. Probably had a customer come up to him, but our AIM staff, and I don't know, Matt and all the rest of our dealers are out at racetracks every single weekend. We've got a couple guys in the Sprinter van right there that are at Road America right now, and helping people. Just tons and tons of people asking questions and helping them get more out of their hardware and their software. Robbie at the UTV National Championships was joined us a little bit on his phone, no doubt. So we're out there. If you don't see us at the track, give us a call. Happy to help out in any ways we can. So the next slide is the next webinar. Looking forward to this one too, just like today. James Colborn has been with us a number of times in the past. Very smart guy, very again an enthusiast with motorsports and with data. James has his own website, jamescolborn.com, and Andy also has a YouTube page that I don't have linked there, but we'll give it to you next week. Where he builds videos like what we're doing here and talks about different things. But James is going to join us with a kind of a more special topic. I talked about it a little bit earlier. Determining your and their data analysis learning styles. we try to make this software as flexible as possible, where you can look at the data in the way that you need to. Some people love a spreadsheet, a channels report. Other people really like that, histograms. Other people love the squiggly lines and the GPS based maps. So we're going to talk about a little bit behind the scenes of those learning styles and how to determine what yours is. You got a good idea. That never makes sense to you, that looking at it a certain way. But we're going to talk about that, and then maybe show some different ways to look at the data in those ways. So looking forward to that with James. He's a good friend of ours, and always fun to have him join us. So he'll be here on next Tuesday, October 13th. Looking forward to that. And in closing it out, the here's the contact information. There's Matt's email address, is his Instagram post. What do you, geez, I'm drawing a blank, but
I don't know if it's a page or an account.
Exactly. At Trail Break Matt is how you can go and sign up and watch some of the stuff that he posts. I know he posts a lot of pictures there while he's at the tracks, a lot of kind of cool stuff. His email address, my email address, if you want those Math Channel documents that I talked about, go ahead and drop me a note and I'll send them out as soon as I can. So again, appreciate everybody being here. Matt, thanks for all your help. The Emiliano, Robinson, Robbie in the background answering questions and helping out. Very, very cool. Matt, you have anything else to kind of add as we kind of close this one down?
No, I hope this was good for everyone. I have so much fun doing these, and I'm really glad that people watch and they ask some great questions, and it helps me be better at it because it makes me think of different ways. And I'm looking forward to seeing all the ideas that James has, because even for me, I look at stuff and somebody does a different way and you get those aha moments.
Yeah, without a doubt, that's the biggest feedback I've gotten from these webinars. Are people are just sitting there watching. A lot of you are chatting in the chat box, but there's many more that don't even chat in the chat box. But then I'll get an email, or I see somebody at the track and they go, you know what, I've gotten so much out of those webinars. Just I know what I knew, but I didn't know what I didn't know, and somebody just showed me something in a different way of looking at it, and it just light bulbs go on. So we appreciate you all being out there. Appreciate Matt, you again for coming and helping us do these, and look forward to seeing all of you next next Tuesday, and talk to you soon. Have a good weekend. Hope you go to the track. Hope you're victorious, and we will see you at the next one.